the coach developer for the FA on the UEFA C license, and something that I say to all of the learners, all of the volunteer coaches, I massively take my hat off to you guys for the roles that you play at your clubs, and for the players that you work with. I think it's a huge commitment that you give up your time and your effort, not only midweek, evenings, weather's horrendous at the moment, weekend, mornings, afternoons, but then also to give up your time on an evening like this. I think the commitment that you guys show is absolutely fantastic, and I totally take my hat off to every single one of you. Yeah, so just a really quick bit of background. Worked with Tom, worked with Brent in previous years at Derby County Academy. So, as well as my tutoring for the FA, my current role is head of coach education at Derby County Academy, having previously held the roles there of head of coaching and also the lead foundation phase coach. Currently tutoring, as I said, on the UEFA C license, literally just finished a course in Derby on Tuesday, and previously was a tutor on the old level 1, level 2, and if any of you are experienced enough to remember the old FA Youth Awards as well, I used to tutor on those. But tonight, Tom's asked me to deliver a short presentation about creating and using a coaching syllabus. As he mentioned, I'd really appreciate it if we have a significant amount of interaction. It's only a small group. I have got some slides. I have got some stuff I want to talk through, but please, at any time, if you've got questions, just chuck them in the chat box. Tom can keep me updated. Happy to answer them as we go along, or if I feel that I'm going to address it later on in the presentation as well, that's fine. Just before we get started, I would be really grateful if I could just have a quick show in the chat box. Just two things I want to know. What age group are you predominantly working with at the moment? I know some of you might work across age groups. Which is the main age group that you work with at the moment? And what is the coaching qualification that you either hold or are on at the moment, please? Thank you, Jack. 13s. Thanks, Tony. Any more for any more? The 9s, great. Thanks, Phil. Q. Thanks, Laura. Great. So we've got a real range from under 7 all the way up to. Okay, brilliant. So we've got a real range all the way from under 7s, 9s, 13s. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, all the way up to open age, 16 plus. Great. Thanks, Mike, Jamie. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Fantastic. So I'm quite pleased to say, actually, I've tried to cover a wide range and give various examples throughout the presentation, and it's good to see that we've got that kind of range. Men's and women's game, foundation phase players, youth development phase, open age, and a range of qualifications as well. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it. Mish, if you wouldn't mind just moving on to, what is a coaching syllabus? So, predominantly a coaching syllabus will be a document that contains the information that you need for the concepts or ideas that will be covered for a particular topic, right? And obviously, in our case, that is football and football coaching. Predominantly, the majority of the time, you would set a syllabus for a whole season. But it might be that is broken down, obviously, into particular chunks. We would look to review it. Something that I remember very clearly doing with Mish a few years ago when I was working in the foundation phase was how we used to review the syllabus and get feedback, particularly from the coaches themselves, as to see whether it was working or not. If not, then being willing to make changes to it. So, yes, it is something that you might set out for a whole season or half a season at a time, but that's not to say that you can't review as you go along. It's, an outline for what you want players to learn, considering all the needs of your group, those individuals within the group, but also the needs of the group as a whole. And hopefully it can offer a sort of rounded footballing education for your players, rather than just being about one specific area of the game. If you can just bump us on, Mish, please. So why have one? So again, I would be really grateful if in the chat box you could just indicate, just with a Y or an N or a yes or a no, are you currently working from a coaching syllabus with the club or team that you are working with? And if you are, was that something that you set up yourself, or was that something that was given to you by your club? So yes or no, are you using one? If it's a yes, who set it up, yourself or the club that you're working with? Okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, great. Thanks, Laura. Okay, so no's all round at the moment. Okay, thanks, Dave. Okay. Okay, cheers, Mike. Okay, great. So a few yeses, but majority no's. Okay, so why would we have one? Okay, so a traditional basis for coaching historically has tended to be what we might call reactionary coaching. Okay, so I've set up a player development form for my girls. Oh, can I just go back to that? What did that say? That looked quite an interesting comment there. Can you go back to that answer there, Mish?
I can read it out for you. So
yeah,
I've set up a player development form for my girls to provide their responses to what their strengths and weaknesses are, and I've offered my feedback to them too.
Okay, brilliant. Great, thank you. So I'll just continue where I was. So yeah, we've had this kind of tendency to be reactionary. So we spot that something from a game day wasn't good enough, not up to the standard that we wanted, not up to expectations of what they're capable of players of. So we go and work on that during the next session. So for example, maybe we conceded loads of goals from set pieces at the weekend. So my reaction is, right, okay, we obviously need to work on defending set pieces. That's what I'm going to do in our working training this week. So it's tended to be fairly sort of reactionary. And although, that is quite a common and popular way of setting up how you're going to coach your sessions, actually the long-term benefits of it are fairly minimal. If you imagine, clearly there would be stuff that you would miss that might be development areas for your players. But much of the time you only tend to need to be reactive to performance if there's a massive significance on the results. So clearly when you're looking at sort of first team professional football level or senior football, there'd be much more emphasis on, for example, the team that you are just about to play next and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and working on those, or working on the things that you weren't so good at last week, and want to improve on in the next game. But as I said before, the long-term benefits of that, especially for our younger players, are fairly minimal. Okay, so if we're working towards a syllabus, we can tend to categorize that more as periodized coaching rather than reactionary coaching. So then that becomes a sort of planned, logical scheme of work. Okay, and of course, you guys will all know this from the courses that you've been on. You put in the players at the center of your planning. And if I just have, I think I can do it myself, can't I? If I just have a quick look at Jack's comments there, that's a great comment to hear from Jack, that you've set up a form to get feedback from the players about what they feel their strengths are and what their areas for development might be. So obviously you're really putting an emphasis then on the players being at the center of your planning. Now, for me, a good coach is planning their practice prior to arriving at the coaching session. And I totally appreciate the reality of the situation, which is a lot of you guys will be out there working full time, family life, children of your own, and to be able to spend time planning for your coaching sessions is, a significant sort of impact on your time. But a good coach will at least plan the practice prior to arriving at a coaching session. But I think an excellent coach or an excellent team or club is going to plan for a length of time ahead, whether that be a season, a block, a period of time. Okay. And the reason that I'll just use a bit of an analogy. So we've got a hand up, Mish. I don't know if that we want to follow that or.
It's up to you if you want to roll. I'm sure Dave will wait for a.
Okay, let me just finish the bits on this slide, and I'll come back to you, Dave. Okay, so let's give an example from school. Okay, so if you've got a class of school children and they are studying maths, okay, we're not going to do algebra on 1 week, and then the next week we jump to geometry, then we go to calculus, then we go to probability and statistics the week after. Okay, it's not the way that they would work in school. Or if you're doing history, you're not going to do Romans 1 week, Greeks next week, etc., etc. Okay, you'd have a plan and you'll study a particular topic over a period of time. Thinking in some of our learning strategies as well, though, there would definitely be a need then to revisit that topic later on to try and get that sort of retrieval practice and to, to embed that learning. So it's not like we're just going to learn a topic once and then forget about it for the next 3 months. So that is one of the challenges of using a syllabus. So planning the individual session, that should be the relatively that should be the easy bit. Okay, you know your players well, you know what you're planning for. But if the pre-planning is done correctly, okay, you've already got an idea of the topic, you've already got an idea of the type of session planning that you're going to do, and that session planning really will just require you to fill in the blanks on an individual session plan, because you already know the topic you're going to work on. You haven't got to spend that time thinking, right, what should we work on tonight? What did I do last week? What did I do last month? They've already covered that. They weren't very good, with all these sort of questions. If you've got that stuff pre-planned from a logical perspective, then the actual individual session planning time and thought processes that go into it should be relatively straightforward. Have we got a question here, Dave? Is that what the hand's up for? I'm quite happy to take one if there is.
Yeah, it's just sharing a bit of experience, really. My current team is Leicester University men's team. Prior to that, I've coached for 15 years in grassroots, all the way from under 6 all the way through to under 18, and I'm used to doing planning periods of work for the squad. Now, the uni lads, I've only known them since they came back off of holidays in September, and within 2 weeks we had to put a team together to start playing matches. Now, I didn't know any of the players or any of the what they're capable of or anything like that. So I suppose in a way my coaching has been a little bit reactionary, trying to get to know the players and look at the different units, how they're doing, adding bits of detail along the way. And over the last 6 weeks, I've worked out that actually our weakest area is out of possession in a high press. So after Christmas, we'll have a block of work, but that block of work is a result of being reactionary to the observations.
Yeah, and
that makes sense.
And 100%, and totally understandable as well. I think a lot of my experience working with coaches, for example, on the UEFA C license, is that a lot of the time they are coaching because maybe their son or daughter is playing for a team, and quite often they will stay with a team for a lengthy period of time. They will be with that team from under 9 all the way through to whenever. But I mean, totally understandable the way that you've done that and correctly to go about that. You've inherited a brand new group of players of which you know next to nothing, if not nothing, when they first arrive. So, it's fairly apparent there that those first few training sessions will be about your observation skills, your analysis of those players, both as as a group of players, as units within a team, and as individuals. And then it obviously takes that period of time for you then to be able to assess and analyze what their needs are, again, both individually as a unit and as a group of players. So I think it makes perfect sense the way that you've approached that, and also the fact that you've now recognized that there is a particular area for development, and that is something that I'm going to spend a block of time working on, rather than kind of ad hoc from one week to the next. So that's a great example, David. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, just to reiterate on this bit here, why we would have this in, we're not jumping from one topic to another week on week, but we've got a logical plan of what we want the players to learn, what we want them to practice, what we want them to try and what areas we want them to try and develop. And as I said, in terms of why you might do that, well, certainly if you can spend time in the off season, for example, in the summer, putting a plan together for a team. Let's say you've already worked with them this season, you've got a good idea of what they need. You've also got an idea of what format of the game they're going to be playing next season. So for your lot, Dave, that's fairly straightforward. It's an adult team. They're going to be playing 11v11, but some of you might be transitioning from 5-a-side to 7-a-side, or 7-a-side to 9-a-side, which might mean that there are some slight alterations required for your syllabus for the following season. But you would already know that in advance. And actually, that little bit of downtime that both the players and certainly you guys would need in the summer, it might be that some of that time then is spent planning either with an assistant coach, a co-coach, a mentor, somebody else from the club that you're working at, and spend that valuable time in the summer planning, which then might help you on a cold, wet Wednesday evening in the middle of December when you're rushing from work or rushing from home to training, and you can't think about you haven't got time to think about what session you're going to put on. You've already got that sort of pre-planned in advance. I think there was a comment there in the chat. Let me just see if I can pick that up. So Raz, so this is essentially ensuring that you have all the individual blocks covered for developing the individual at a more holistic level. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of putting it. Obviously, Raz, you've got to find that balance between the development of the individuals, but also trying, particularly as the players get older, trying to develop their understanding of how to play in units and how to play as a team as well. But essentially, what you're saying there is correct. If you're all right to nudge us on again, Mish, please. Okay, so what does it look like? And hopefully, I've got a couple of examples that I might be able to share with you. Now, my advice would be, and from the comments that you put on earlier, clearly there are a number of people that don't have a syllabus and you're not working from a syllabus at the moment, and I totally understand that, and I totally get as well, because I've experienced this myself, that it could actually be quite a daunting prospect to think, I literally don't know where to start. This is going to take me forever. There are so many things to think about that actually, do you know what? I'll procrastinate a little bit and I'll put it off till next week, or I'll put it off till next season, or I'll do that another time. I completely get that. I've felt that myself. When you've got a particularly big piece of work coming up, that there's something you need to put together. It can be quite daunting to think, I don't even know what my starting point is. How am I ever going to put all this together? Okay, my advice on that, and hopefully I'll be able to give you a couple of examples, but my advice on that would be to give it a go. Write down the stuff that you think might be useful, might be helpful for your team. And it might be that you write a list of 100 different things. Okay, that's fine. Get a list down. Get some thoughts down. It might just be chucking ideas down on a piece of paper, or however you take your notes. Better to have more and to be able to take some stuff away than not have enough and to have to keep thinking. So get into a bit of a stream of thought and just go for it. Just get that sheet of paper out. Get that excuse me, screen up on your laptop. Okay, make some notes and make a start. Okay, so I think that is possibly one of the bits that puts coaches off and puts people off is this is such a daunting prospect. I can't even begin to think about starting it. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, it should be a live or a working document. Now, that's not to say you just change from 1 week to week. However, it might be. So, for example, our lead foundation phase coach at our academy will bring the coaches together probably before Christmas and go, right, we've been working from this syllabus for 5-6 months now. Can I get some feedback? Is it working? If so, great, let's keep those bits that are working well. Is there any of it that's not working quite so well at the moment? And if so, why not? And let's look at whether we can make amendments to it. So you consider when you might review the syllabus. It might be part way through the season, it might be at the end of the season. Who else you might include? Certainly get feedback from other coaches that you're working with. And I think if we're being really smart, I think I've forgotten the name, sorry, who mentioned it earlier. Was it Jack? Yeah. So like Jack, get the thoughts of your players. Your players are involved in this week in, week out. Get their thoughts, get some feedback from those guys as well as the coaches that you're working with, and also as well as taking time to reflect for yourself. Okay, so I have got a couple of examples. One is more targeted at sort of grassroots foundation phase, and then I've got an example from an old youth development phase academy syllabus that we used to use. So can I share my screen as well, Mish?
So you've got two choices. You can put them in the chat as attachments, or you can take control, which is no issue, and share your screen. So up to you.
So if I click share now,
yeah, should let you take control. Yeah, it snatched it off me, so you're good to go.
Okay, and can people see that? Can you see that, Mish?
I can see it, yeah.
Yeah, so great. So hopefully everybody else can as well. So when I said it might be quite daunting, this is quite straightforward. It's literally just two or three pages. First thing might be, okay, I want to identify how I want my team to play. Now, that might be a club-wide thing. You might have a club-wide playing philosophy or a playing identity. Some of these grassroots clubs have loads of teams, and they might say, well, actually, do you know what? We want all of our teams to try and play in a similar way and with a similar identity, so that if someone came along and they weren't wearing any club kit, someone would go, okay, yeah, actually, I know that's a Derby County Academy team, or I know that's a Sheffield team, whatever. Or it might just be for your own team, but try and identify how you want your team to play. So just some basic examples here. Look, we might want it to be possession based. We want to play through the thirds. We want to encourage creativity. We want to recognise when to play forward and when we can counter attack. And out of possession, we want all players involved in winning the ball back, regain shape quickly, and so on. Okay, so you just have a basic identity of how you want your team to play. Obviously, as Dave mentioned earlier, he made an assessment of his group and recognised after a fairly quick period of time what the needs were of that group. So you will have to consider those sort of individual needs of the players within your group. And then once you've done that, like I said, just get some ideas down. The session should come from the coaching syllabus. We're not just reacting to what happened in the last game. We still try and maintain individual challenges because our players are all different. Give a little bit of autonomy as well to the coaches. So I'm hoping Mish will back me up on this. But even though we have, a plan for our coaches at Derby, we don't want to take away that autonomy for the coaches to actually plan their own individual sessions. So it might be that you're given a topic, but actually within that topic, we appreciate that our coaches have been and spent time. They're very experienced. They've spent time doing research and doing qualifications. I think the last thing a coach wants is for someone to physically give them a session plan and go, that's what you're delivering tonight. So within the framework, we give a bit of flexibility to the coach to say, okay, here's the topic I want you to work on. And as long as you're working on that topic and achieving the outcomes that we want to get from it, the actual session design is pretty much up to you. That's how you would work, Mish?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, I would hate it as a coach. I quite like the idea that someone's giving me a plan and something to follow, but actually what I don't want is someone, and also it's an absolute nightmare. I don't know if anyone's experienced this before, but I might write down a coaching session plan on a piece of paper or whatever, print it off, makes perfect sense to me, but I give it to somebody else and it looks like it's written in a different language, really difficult to follow. So something that makes sense to us isn't necessarily going to make sense to another coach. Also, it might be that some of the themes we're working on are building on stuff that we've done in previous weeks. You might be able to give your players a bit of homework. So here's something based on this theme. I get that a lot of coaches out there are perhaps only getting an hour and a half access to your players of training time a week, and then a match day. So it might be that you want them to go away and do a little bit of work in their own time. Bit of a session structure there for an hour. That's entirely up to you guys how you want to do that. But then just here's a few ideas. Okay, some ball mastery work, some pressing, shielding, tackling, and so on. And you can see the different topics there. Okay, so you've got a theme and then you've got topics within that theme and a breakdown of which weeks they're going to be. All right. I think one of the key bits for me here, and I'm going to talk about it shortly, is seeing the match day as an extension of that kind of learning environment, of that training environment. So again, it's not that, okay, we're working this week on, our pressing. So there's an example that Dave gave with his team at Leicester Uni, recognise that they might need some work on their high press. Sorry, I lost my train of thought briefly there. Where was I there, Mish? I got onto a bit of a train of thought. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, it's all right. I've got it back. And then the match day should be an extension of that. So it's not like we've worked on pressing during the week, but actually when match day comes, the coach, that's just all gone out the window. No, we've got some objectives on a match day that relate to the theme or the topic that we've been working on. Okay, so that's a really simple, straightforward version there, but you can see how you would know, right, okay, next week or for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be working on our passing. I've already got an idea of the theme that we're going to work on. Here's some possible topics. Now I've just got to design the individual session plan to cover those topics. Okay, so that's one example there. Another example, now this one might look a little bit daunting. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So this is something that would have taken me a considerable amount of time to work on, but it might be that you have some aims, some overall aims of the phase or the age group that you're working with. You also might talk about the type of environment that you want to create with that group of players. You might have some guiding principles of play, like I mentioned earlier. So what do we want to do in possession? What do we want to do out of possession? What do we want to do on transition when we've won the ball? What do we want to do on transition when we've just lost the ball? So they're your guiding principles, and therefore everything else that you do comes out of those. Okay, you then might have a more specific focus for a particular age group or pair of age groups. You might have a particular playing formation that you want to stick with. Certainly sticking with one formation would help you with your pre-planning, because you've not got loads of changes to make on a week in, week out. And then you might actually put together a syllabus here. So this is, I'm looking at what's the structure of the session, predominantly technical, possession based, small sided games. There might be there's some individual learning plan work going on, etc. Okay, which type of techniques and skills are we working on in this session? How are we teaching the game? So that's maybe a little bit more of the tactical information that we're giving to the players. If I think about Dave's example, he was talking about high press. So it might be, Dave, that you're working with a unit of players or with a midfield and attacking unit, for example, but actually the team that you're playing against, so your opposition within that training session, and hopefully you've got another coach that works with you, they might be working on playing out from the back, for example, or building from the back so that you've got something to press against. Hopefully you guys are doing loads of game related practices, and I've had this on a UEFA C this week. We're doing any kind of game related practices. The likelihood is there's going to be some element of transition in that practice. So again, if I take Dave's example, he's pressing. The transition then will be, well, if they're out of possession now, they're pressing. If they win the ball back, okay, what's going to happen next? So allow that transition to occur and cater for it. And then, we might have some physical, some psychological, and some social considerations. So going back, I think it was to Raz's question earlier about that more sort of holistic development of the players as well as just the technical, tactical. And this works its way through building the attack, high pressing, some creating and finishing, transition is included in there. And I have this for each week. Added to that, we would also include some kind of a physical program as well. Again, based on a syllabus that connects to the work that we're doing on the pitch with the players. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing mine again now, Mish, if you're okay to go back to what we were on before, and if you could move me on a slide.
Just bear with me, just got to figure that out. Browse my computer. One sec, that's just going to upload.
I feel like I've been talking a lot. If anybody's got any questions along the way, please feel free to chuck them in the chat box or just unmute yourself and shout out. If not, then you can move me on one, Tom, please.
Is that the right one?
Oh, no. I thought I'd check. Look what I've done. Got a spelling mistake.
And you were criticising spelling, not.
I was very critical of somebody else earlier. Now look what I've done. Please accept my apologies for the spelling mistake. I've only written the word syllabus about 20 times in this presentation. I've still managed to get it wrong. Okay, so I think I've mentioned most of these things. You try and link it to a style of play. And you might be setting them up to fail if you impose an unsuitable style of play on them. So, taking Jack's point earlier, put the players at the forefront of your mind when you're trying to establish that style of play. So that might just be, how do I want them to attack? How do I want them to defend? Take Dave's example, when, where, how are we going to press? How do we react when we win or lose the ball? So including those transitional elements as well, and considering your own players' strengths and abilities. Okay. So, and asking the players, so discovering that stuff sets the foundation for how you want the game to be played, what you want from your syllabus, how to work on those styles of play at training. Hopefully you've all come across sort of 3 R's from the course that you've done. So can you get lots of repetition in there? So your players are having lots of opportunities to practice whatever the topic it is that you're on that week. Is it relevant? So, are the practices relevant to what the players need? Are they relevant to where they're at in their age and stage of development? And also, are they realistic to the game? I do recognise, of course, and again, a conversation we've had a number of times this week, that it can be a difficult challenge to try to get repetition and realism at the same time. So let's just say, for example, we want lots of repetition of shooting. Clearly from safety point of view, you're only going to be shooting into a 1 goal at a time. how do you maintain the realism from a game and still get that repetition? So I do understand that's a challenge, but if you can try and get those three things in, can I get repetition so my players are getting lots of opportunities to practice? Is it relevant to where they're at in their development journey at the moment? And is it realistic to their game? Also, hopefully you've come across this as well. So consider the practice spectrum. Right, so consider on one side of it, you might have practices that predominantly work on technique. So that's going to be that unopposed technical practices. On the other hand, on the other end, you've got practices that focus more on skill. So that, the decision making, the when, where, and the why of using those particular techniques. So you might do some overloaded practices, you might do some matched up practices that help the players put the learning into action in more game-like situations. Okay. So yeah, considering those things when you're using your coaching syllabus that I've put there. Okay, just move us. I think there was a comment actually. Let me pick that up. Within a curriculum, where does the review happen? Yeah, good question. Yeah, so we've considered this on a number of occasions. So it might be that you actually build in some kind of a review week into the syllabus anyway. So it might be that we say, okay, well, we're going to spend 3 weeks working on pressing, like you talked about. We might spend another 3 weeks working on the build. We might spend 3 weeks working on a mid-block or whatever it is, and then we're going to have a review week. I think particularly relating to the age group and the type of team you're coaching there, Dave, it might be that you review that on a more regular basis. And it might also be that you incorporate into your program actually some time when you are a little bit more reactionary. Can you just indicate to me, Dave, how many times a week do you train?
We train twice a week, and there's a Sunday and a Monday session. The Sunday is more of a physical workload session, and the Monday is more of a technical session because we have matches on the Wednesday.
Right. Okay.
But tomorrow morning we're coaching at 7 o'clock in the morning, so.
Right, and that's what I say at the start, and go right back to my very first point. Absolutely take my hat off to you guys. I've experienced that before with university teams. I think at Loughborough, where coaching sessions start at absolutely ridiculous o'clock in the morning. But it might be that for a team like that, you might actually build into your program sometime that is a little bit more reactionary. So I'm not saying we just go, oh no, on Wednesday we conceded all these goals in this manner, so I'm going to spend my time working on that. Excuse me. But like you've done, you might assess over a period of time and go, actually, this is a bit of a recurring theme. And if I don't address it, it's going to have a negative impact on performances, on results, and then potentially on players' motivation, self-esteem, and so on and so forth. So it might be that when you have got multiple training sessions per week, and particularly if you're working with a team, in the sort of older adult senior level of football, that maybe you do have a little bit more of a reactionary approach incorporated into your program, because you might spot some common themes that need working on. There was another comment, I think it was about incorporated individuals. Seems to be very team unit based. How do you incorporate specific player development if not on basis above? Okay, for me, especially working with the younger players, this is predominantly about individual player development, and the fact that helping those individuals to improve their own capabilities, is going to have a positive impact on the team itself. I think, those foundation phase, younger youth development phase, and all the way through, really, I think the individual focus, should be incorporated into all of your session planning. It might be that, who was it who said earlier, Jack, identifying strengths and areas of development for players. And then when I'm putting my program together, my individual session planning then, because I already know the topic I'm going to be working on, but my individual session planning might be focusing on player X, Y, and Z because they've got particular areas of need of development in this area. Or it might be that I've got 2 or 3 players that already excel at this and I want to make them even better if I possibly can. So yeah, incorporating the individuals into that, I think is it is essential. I'll pick that other comment up as well. Tried to have a fixed syllabus, found the undeniable being at the mercy of parents. I don't have a high level of reliability. Okay. Now, this is probably a debate for another occasion, but certainly the influence and impact of what the parents of the players might have is something I know that can be a challenge at all levels, at academy level, at grassroots level, at all levels, is that influence. And look, there's nothing to say that we can't still be we can't still adapt and change, even if that is at short notice. The players, unless you put it into some parent WhatsApp group or some kind of chat that you might have, the players wouldn't necessarily know the topic or the theme that you were going to be working on from one week to the next anyway. So if you had to adapt at short notice or change, or do you know what, actually just turn up sometimes at a training session and go, we're going to play a game tonight, and we're going to play loads of 5v5, or we're going to play 3v3s, then I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that, as long as that's not every week. So being adaptable, being willing to change, I think is a positive thing. If you just move me on one more, Tom, please, just go to the match day stuff, because I mentioned it earlier. So I think it's good practice to see the match day as an extension of that syllabus and an extension of the learning that you are helping your players with. So we had a big conversation on Tuesday on a UEFA C about how coach behaviours might change from a training session to a match day, and actually what the players really want from you is to be consistent. So we haven't got a Jekyll and Hyde approach. If I'm getting a nice, calm, softly spoken Rich on a Wednesday, who's very encouraging and doesn't mind players making mistakes, as I view them as learning opportunities, and who is willing to have individual conversations in a calm and approachable manner with my players, then I want them to have that on a match day as well, not a ranting and a raving because an open goal's been missed or because a mistake's been made that's going to cost a goal. So getting some consistency, both in terms of the information that you're putting across, the language that you are using, and by that I mean kind of coaching language, the terminology that you're using with the players, but also massively in terms of your coach behaviours as well. So don't complicate things by using language all of a sudden on a match day that either isn't right for that age group or that isn't included in the syllabus. Try and link what you've been looking for to the match day objective. So again, it might be that actually you have more than one way of measuring success. So the commonly accepted measure of success in a football match is, well, what's the score? But actually, you might look at viewing measures of success in different ways, and it might be, well, actually, Dave's been working on the high press for the last 2 weeks. So actually, on how many occasions do we win the ball back in the opposition's third of the pitch where they're building? Is that another measure of success? I don't know if Brent ever addressed this when he spoke to you, but he was really skilled at this kind of thing. He would have if he got substitutes on the side of the pitch, they would almost have like a little checklist. This is what we've been working on this week. Yes, we're keeping the score, although to be fair to Brent, he very rarely did keep the score in sort of under 9 games and stuff like that. But he would have all the measures of success, and his players would be keeping track of that and going, okay, we've done this X number of times. That's one way that we're going to judge that we're improving, that we're getting we're getting success from what we're working on. Try and analyze the game rather than just watching it, and have that focus on just 2 or 3 key things, and ideally they will be related to the topic that you've been working on that week. And it's not all of a sudden, because it's become match day, I'm going to try and focus on everything, and I'm looking at the in possession and the out of possession and the transition as well, and every little mistake that happens, and trying to correct everything. Okay, hopefully those match day objectives that are based around the syllabus will help you to focus on what you are looking at and what you are analysing while the game's going ahead, because there are so many things that are happening in the game, it's impossible to cover them all, and we'll just get a little bit lost. If you watch everything, you end up seeing nothing because you're just looking for too many things. Okay. Half time, again, can we refer back to the match day objectives, again, based around the syllabus and the stuff we've been working on? All too easy to get to half time and go off on 100 different tangents because you've seen so many things happen in the game. Okay. It might be that you just take yourself a couple of moments, maybe you give the players a minute to go and get a drink, chat amongst themselves, just decompress a little bit. Okay, ask the players for their opinion. What do you think? How are we getting on? And then refer back to those match day objectives. Okay, this is what we worked on in training this week. This is what we said we were going to try and achieve during the game. How are we getting on against those objectives? Okay, and ask the players how they think the game's going. Get feedback from them. One of the little bugbears I quite often have with coaches is they're very good at asking the players, but actually, do they really listen to the feedback that they're given, or do they just pay lip service to it? So I might ask for your opinion, and you put your opinion forward, but I just go on and plow on and say what I was going to say anyway. So if you are going to ask players for their opinion as to how things are going, make sure you take that on board, because they're the ones that are in the middle of the action. They're the ones that are seeing the game, for what it really is. We're looking at things from a very different angle, both philosophically but also physically as well. And share the key bits from what you've observed, and then develop a joint plan for the second half. And then post match, again, I know things sometimes can get a little bit emotional, might get a little bit heated, bit of tension in there, but refer back to those objectives and how we're going to measure success. And are the players ultimately, I think there was a question earlier about individuals, are the players improving? Are those individual players within my team, within my squad of players, are they making improvements? Okay, and hopefully you will then link all of that back to the syllabus that you're working on. Okay, so I think in terms of the slides, Mish, that's pretty much me done, but I'm more than happy to spend a bit of time either taking feedback, asking for coaches' observations and thoughts, or to answer any questions. Okay, let me just have a look at these. So, Dave, I normally ask the students at halftime what they think we might need to do the second half. It'd be rare for me to give instruction, but I might provide some observations. Great, yeah. And giving that empowerment to the players and to the students, I think is great. Like I said, they're the ones that are in there. They're in the thick of the action. They know how it feels, how it looks in the game. So it would be remiss of us, not to take that information on board. The simple ones that we quite often use would just be what went well and what would be even better if. So make sure we're still focusing on some positives, because even in the worst of performances of whatever 20, 25, 45 minutes of football, there are going to be some positives in there. So what's gone well? Okay, right. And what's going to be even better if, and what are the changes that we need to make in order to try and achieve those goals for what might be better come the second half or the next game or whenever it is. So yeah, good point. Thank you. I think someone else is typing something in. Please feel free, anybody, to either raise a hand or chuck Jack. Always start off the halftime team talk asking the players for their thoughts first and foremost, as it is their game. Yeah, great point. I'll then also provide 2 or 3 pieces of observational feedback. Together we will agree on how to merge the two and win the game. Interesting that the focus there is on winning the game, Jack, but I think there's some great points that you've made there. And I really like this kind of you, me, agree approach. So I'm going to ask you what you think. Okay. I'm going to give you some of my ideas, what I think. So there's the you and the me, and then the agree. So how are we, you said, how are we going to merge the two? How are we going to bring those things together? How are we going to get a common goal in order to, and I'm going to say, improve performance in the second half rather than necessarily win the game? But I totally take your point. And, you know, you look at some of the top managers around, I think, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but I watched some video clips of Arsene Wenger being interviewed by, and I've got to try and remember who they were now. I think it was Sol Campbell, maybe Ian Wright, and possibly one other. I can't remember exactly who it was. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but basically, particularly the English players, they were so shocked when Arsene Wenger came in, and at half time, if they'd been playing terribly in the first half or if they were losing, you know, they might have expected teacups to be thrown and effing and jeffing and you know, a manager having a real go. And they were so shocked that Arsene Wenger's style was to just sit calmly, allow the players to talk, allow them to get some of those emotions off their chest. And then before they went back out for the second half, just 2 or 3 really clear points. For you guys, it might be that one of those is in possession, one's out of possession, and one's about transition, or one is about our mentality in the second half of the game. So, yeah, really nice to see that you're thinking along those lines, Jack. Yeah, Dave, have you got a point to make or a question?
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm dominating part of the conversation here. I've been doing some reading up on methods of learning and curriculum stuff, and there seems to be 2 trains of thought. One about linear learning in terms of working through a curriculum, and another about spiral learning to enable players to come back to something they've not really achieved. And one of the arguments is that within a linear learning curriculum based, not all the players will learn at the same pace, at the same stuff at the same pace. Some players may need to come back to be able to repeat something and then, you know, carry on. And I think there's a tendency within grassroots, okay, we haven't got time to do this, we're going to do that. And we don't always notice those players, especially when players go through maturation and changes in, you know, schooling and all that sort of stuff. Some players may get left behind. We don't appreciate they're getting left behind because we're so focused on the linear learning and trying to get to an objective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it makes a really good point. Yeah, and there's a lot, you know, to be fair, there was a slide that I've taken out that I was going to have in tonight about retrieval practice as well as a sort of learning theory. So yeah, I think it's similar to the point that you're making. If you think about it, you know, we might, and I think actually, to be fair, Mish, I think this is a topic you raised on our coaching curriculum a couple of years ago, which was we've covered something in week 1 and we haven't revisited it until, I don't know, whatever, week 12. And so basically we're almost starting from scratch again. So rather than, as you say, that sort of linear approach where we're doing something different each week, week on week, can we go back to a topic? And it might be that actually we got to a certain stage with this topic last time. We're going to revisit a bit of that to get that retrieval going, and the players are thinking, right, great, I've done this before. Yeah, I remember that. I remember what we did. And then you nudge it on a little bit further in terms of their learning on the next occasion and continue to revisit it as the season goes on. Because you're right, yeah, that linear approach, and it you know, it's got a number of drawbacks. The ones that you mentioned, that players don't all learn at the same pace, but also that one of, actually, we've covered this ages ago, and by the time we come back to cover it again, I've completely forgotten what we did the first time. So if you get a chance, maybe have a look at some of the retrieval practice theory that's out there at the moment as well, of supporting learning of, I mean, particularly it's related at the moment to, you know, to education, but you know, we can obviously relate that to learning within football as well. But yeah, great point. Thank you for that.
I have a couple of questions just whilst others maybe think of some more. Just based on what what I've sort of seen and heard tonight. Just how important is it to make sure that your syllabus sort of links to the club's philosophy? So like a working example of that would be, I think you were creative players or something on that syllabus earlier. You'd be amazed how many times we're out and about and people say, yeah, we want creative decision makers. And then you maybe watch a session put on by the club and it's not aligned to that. So just how important is that to factor in to the syllabus?
I think the importance is huge. I think the reality is probably a different question. And I would imagine I know, certainly from our experiences, that one of the biggest challenges, and especially for those of you that are at some of these big grassroots clubs where you might have a club identity and a playing philosophy and a playing style, is how do you ensure that consistency across all of those different age groups and teams that you've got without having some kind of either coach education program or series of observations and feedback to the coaches. I think there's nothing more frustrating for a coach developer or a coach mentor or I'm thinking back to the course that I just ran, and there's nothing more frustrating, I think, than setting something up. This is the way we want to play. This is our playing identity. Yes, I want creative players. I want players who aren't fearful of making mistakes. I want independent decision makers. I want players who think for themselves. And yet it comes to a match day or a training session and a coach is barking orders saying, do this, do that, do the other. So really frustrating. That would need to be then embedded and underpinned by a coaching philosophy as well, that talks through the sort of, the coaching spectrum around command style, trial and error, guided discovery, all that sort of stuff. So I think it was of massively high importance, but the reality of ensuring that is delivered on a consistent basis takes a hell of a lot of work and a lot of input from probably other people at clubs, or as a minimum, some kind of peer learning. So you're in a position with us, for example, Mish, that you've been there for a number of years, you're very experienced, you understand how the program works. You might be able to pass that experience on to another coach that you're working with, and also be able to check in with each other as well and go, actually, look, this is the philosophy, this is the identity, this is the way we want to play. Is that what we're doing? In most cases, a lot of clubs would probably need somebody else to come in and provide that support, whether it be a coach developer, a mentor, a head of coaching, whatever it is. Can
I pause that question? I'm going to actually go on and answer that question because it fits.
Sure. How do you resist the urge to come away from the syllabus if there is a consistent issue within the group? For example, you may be working on passing through the thirds, but you're noticing that players are really struggling in the press on a match day, but the passing through the thirds is okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, no, it's a perfectly reasonable question, and I think I touched on it briefly earlier. Is to say, that this syllabus isn't hard and fast. It is constantly under review. Ultimately, you are addressing what the players need, and there's nobody in a better position than you at your team, Jack or Dave or Raz or any of you other coaches out there. You know your players better than anybody else. You see them week in, week out. You see them at training, you see them on a match day, you might see them outside in a different environment as well. So you know them and you know their needs better than anybody else. So for me, the syllabus shouldn't be hard and fast. It should be something that's a guide, but it is adaptable, it is flexible to meet the needs of, and again, I mentioned this earlier, it might be the individuals within the team, it might be certain units, it might be the team as a whole. So yeah, I don't think you need to resist the urge to come away from it if you've got a rationale and strong reasoning behind why you want to make amendments to that syllabus. I don't have a problem with that at all.
I could give a recent example of that because I spoke to Rich about it probably 3 weeks ago with my set of players. Control's a big part of how we want to play, and we were lacking control through a bit of naivety, possibly more than anything. So I spoke to Rich about it. I also spoke to the phase lead to say, I think we need to park the syllabus for a couple of sessions to really bring it back to some key fundamentals, some principles. So we parked the syllabus, we moved off, we spent a Saturday in particular, Saturday morning, and did a whole session on build-up play, because that's what was needed for the players at the time. Because we felt if we didn't address it, it would escalate and become the behaviours we were seeing we didn't want to see would become embedded, and it'd have been much harder then to bring it back. So that's just a live example of parking a syllabus, maybe for the benefit of the individuals in the group there. So that was just recent in my mind because we'd only just spoke about it.
Yeah, and a good example as well, and I think I mentioned earlier as well with what was the other one you were just saying then? So you're just going to park it for a bit, and you can always go back to somewhere else where you were in the syllabus based on what those players need. But yeah, I don't think you need to be afraid to come away from it if you've got a solid rationale behind the decision making as to why you're going to come away from it. And if it's what the players need, then ultimately that's the most important thing.
I've got another question. I'm sure you'll get another good question in the chat. I felt like mine last one sparked the question. So there'll be people on this call as well that are not just team focused. They may be coming into this with a club mindset, and they might have teams from 7 all the way through, and that's obviously something that you have to deal with now. How easy is that and it probably comes back to the philosophy and the coach philosophy we spoke about, but how easy is that to implement club wide, and how does it differentiate maybe between the dots and then those players at the older age group? How do you keep the golden thread, if you will?
Yeah, good question. But I know that grassroots clubs are capable of doing this. So, for example, there's a grassroots club, a large club in Derby that I've worked with on a couple of occasions, done some CPD with them. They have managed to try and implement, or they managed to implement a playing identity, a playing philosophy across age groups, all the way from their youngest dots right up to, I think, a senior team that they've got. It is a challenge. It's a big piece of work. They've got a team of people, so they will have kind of coach mentors, almost some kind of like a head of coaching type role that supports the coach development, to try and ensure that there is a consistent approach to playing in that identity. I think the identity. Yeah, we've had this conversation a number of times at Derby, right? So obviously the detail isn't the same for the dots as it is for the under 21s. Not going to be the same for the under 9s as it was under 21. However, let's take Dave's example of the high press. So it might be that we have got an approach at our club that says we want to win the ball as high up the pitch as possible and as quickly as possible. Just as an example, that might be part of our playing identity. Now, under 21 level, that takes on a really sort of tactical, that takes on a real sort of tactical approach where we're analysing the opposition, we're analysing the strengths and weaknesses of our own players, we're putting together a strategy. So, for example, this year, our under 21s, predominantly when they're in a high press, they're playing in a 4-2-2 formation. So they go with kind of 2 9s, 2 10s, and what we would call 2 6s. And there would be a particular style that we want to impart onto the opposition when we're out of possession. So that takes on but ultimately it still requires the players to perform to a high level, both in their mental approach, their psychological approach to being aggressive and wanting to win the ball back, but also from a physical point of view, actually what pace can they run at to go when they go and press, to put pressure on the opposition. Now, at under 9 level, we're not going to talk to them about all those sorts of things, but we might just use some simple terminology of saying, win the ball back as quickly as you can, or hunting packs, or something like that. So the approach is still the same, whether they're under 9s, under 13s, under 21s, but maybe the language that we use and the way we go about it is slightly different. But that, you can still make that link between the different age groups as they progress. This is how we want to do it. In the younger age groups, this is how we go about it. it's still the same thing when they get older. It's just got more layers of tactical detail behind it. If it's something about, you know, if it's building out from the back, for example, you know, again, it might be a more tactical approach in the under-18s. In the under-9s, it's more principle based, and it's about passing and receiving techniques, or about movement to receive. So I think you can build that, but obviously it takes a lot of work.
Just you handled the question well there, because that was a stitch up. Just on that, I'm about to just post a message in the chat. Just give it a thumbs up if it interests you. It's just a case of, Rich has referred to coaching philosophy and coaching behaviour quite a lot, and I think a lot of what's been covered tonight links to that. So if there is interest, if that's something you'd be interested in attending, if we put it on, just put the thumbs up on that, and then I can refer back to it tomorrow morning when I'm following up, just because I think so much of it ties in, and it's possibly a topic that's just not touched on at all in grassroots football, and Rich has made some really valid points there. I think you can have a syllabus and you can have a coaching philosophy. It's almost like a triple header. You've got to have all three working together. So if there is interest, we can possibly look at that being the next one post Christmas, and it's sparked a few ideas in my head as well about just what sort of support we might be able to get in and around that area. So yeah, thanks for that. Was there any more questions in the chat?
Yeah, there's a comment from Stephen, and I wouldn't mind if you could just take yourself off mute, Stephen, if you just go over that for me again, just so I fully understand the question before I give any kind of a comment or answer, if that's all right. Oh, okay. Okay, let me see if I can try and... So isn't the difference that academy type development road demands progression into a consistent open age team, whereas grassroots needs to be flexible to the players at one's disposal in an age group? Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. Now, you know, we have this debate a number of times at our academy whereby, let's take Man City as an example. Okay, they've got a very clearly defined playing identity, the way that they want to play, both in possession, out of possession, and on transition. They have probably got a greater amount of luxury than perhaps we have at Derby, in regard to they have more spending power to be able to go and purchase players to fit the philosophy and the identity that they've got, with the ultimate aim, hopefully, of progressing those players, as you say, through to, you know, the under-21s and ultimately the first team. I think we're perhaps not quite at that stage at the moment, and I'm sure we'll be in the same boat as many other academies, where we're looking for players that have got certain attributes, whether that be physical, you know, technical, and so on. And our aim is to improve those players, and hopefully those players will fit that identity, that playing philosophy that we've got. But actually, ultimately, those players may well go on like we've got now. They might go on loan somewhere where the manager's got a different style of play, or the club's got a different style of play, or they might get sold to another club and they have to be adaptable and go and play in a different formation or with a different playing identity. Yes, grassroots teams probably need to have a little bit more flexibility around that. But again, like Jack made the point earlier, what are the strengths of the players in your team? What are their personal and individual areas for development? And if we've got an identity and a playing philosophy as a club, how can we support the players to try and achieve those goals of the aim that we're after? But I get what you mean. That is probably more of a challenge in grassroots, because you have quite often got a wide range of ability levels within any, you know, particular age group or particular team. I'll take your point.
Yeah, just whilst just saying thanks. Just while we wait to see if any more questions pop in, I do just want to bring your attention to the next few events that we've got running. These are all face-to-face events. So we've got a finishing under the microscope workshop on Monday over at Wath Academy. There's big numbers signed up for that one. It's going to be a double practical, so there'll be loads and loads to take away. Elliot, who is also a UA4C tutor, and one of his colleagues are going to deliver a double practical on that one, so that's going to be really, really good. Thursday next week, so a week today, the next Club 1879 or Doncaster Rovers, whatever you want to call it, workshop is being delivered. I went to the one last Thursday, and I have to say, I know it's my job to sell this, but I have to say, like, if I was going in as a coach, I wasn't going in as a coach for that particular workshop. If I was going in as a coach for that workshop, it was brilliant. Really, really good look at inside, at some of the principles they were going to cover, and it carried straight through into practical. So really high level information, loads of stuff about working with individuals, and technical detail was really, really high. So this one, next Thursday, is around defending the box. So in terms of principles of play, it will be slightly older players. If you are interested in sort of C and B license coaching and above, and getting into the technical detail and the tactical detail around defending the box, that's going to be a really, really insightful one. And then in January as well, again, there's a building the attack one with Derby County legend Paul Green delivering that one. So I appreciate that both those workshops are paid for workshops, which we don't do many of. And I know it's a challenge when they're on a Thursday. It does say 5:30. They never start at 5:30. They normally start at 6:30, and I begged them to change the time, but they're normally like 6 arrival, 6:30 start. So if you're thinking I can't get to Donny by 5:30, hopefully you can sort of do the 6 till 8. But yeah, that's what we've got coming up sort of just before Christmas and then just after. And like I said, what we'll do is we will have a look at maybe looking into a coaching philosophy workshop for the new year. I'll have that chat with Rich once we are out of here. But I just want to open it up one more time if there are any further questions, or if there's anything away from this topic tonight. You've got Rich tonight. You've probably already sensed the amount of experience he's got. You can't catch him out. So if there's other questions or anything else that you want to pick up around anything to do with your context, your coaching, please use this opportunity now, because we penciled into late, so we may as well use it if we've got it. So yeah, fire away. And I'll just knock the slide on to the QR code again. If you haven't done the register, please make sure you either click the link that's in the chat or scan the QR code now. It'll take you to the same spot. Someone is typing. Oh, just saying thanks.
Thanks, Raz. Appreciate that. Two more games to watch, aren't there, tonight, Mish? I would imagine that's if people want to get.
I mean, talking about playing out from the back, I've just seen Fulham's opener on Twitter, and it's yes.
Oh, they scored already. Is that against Brighton? Fulham Brighton, is it?
Yeah, they were playing out from the back. The goalie was nowhere to be seen, and they just passed it into an empty net. Matt, I'll get you ticked in, mate. No drama. Sorted for you. See if these are questions.
Okay, I do you know what, Mish? I'm going to. Is it better to
train as we play in it?
Is it better to push harder at training so the match day is a bit easier? You know, in a bit of a sort of cliched way, Michael, I would go along the lines of, you know, sort of train hard, play easy, or train hard, you know, train the way that you want to play. Certainly, I think, you know, we want our coaching sessions, our training sessions to be high tempo, players competing against each other, players wanting and relishing the challenge of trying to improve, and recognizing that part of trying to improve is that things are going to be difficult at times. Things are going to be challenging. I watched a session back of a coach of ours today. I'd filmed him and got him mic'd up so I could listen to everything he was saying to the players. And there were some wonderful moments in there where he was talking to players who were perhaps getting a little bit upset because they were finding things difficult and things weren't necessarily going their way, and about those bumps in the road and the the fact that you are finding this difficult, the fact that you are finding this as a challenge, is because you are improving. If it was easy, you wouldn't be making improvements, you know. So he was, let's go high level of challenge or high stretch, but also there was high support as well. You know, so we were stretching these players, we were challenging these players, and the players were finding it difficult, and the coach recognised that the players were showing that they were finding it difficult, and he gave them that reassurance that he was there to help them to improve. And one of the reasons why they were finding it so difficult is because it was helping them to get better. And I thought it was a really, really nice moment. So yeah, it's a great point, Michael, there, is that, you know, you work hard in training. You know, football's not a game where you can just go, oh, we just turn it on and off like a tap whenever we feel like it. We can't train at 50% every week and expect to play at 100%. It's not as simple as that. So yeah, get the players working hard in